Hi there, my name is Debbie Waldeck, and I'm creator of the Saving Generation Next project. The purpose of the Saving Generation Next project is to truly teach preventative health education so that we can learn the language of the body, which allows us to recognize early red flags and warning signs of impending diagnosis. I'm sure many don't know that minor conditions like asthma, allergies, PMS, or migraines are actually those early red flags and warning signs of internal imbalances that can lead to future health challenges. But we're going to take charge of our health with knowledge in the Saving Generation Next project because knowledge is power. I want you to consider this. If you're depressed, it doesn't mean you're deficient in Prozac. So why this massive increase in depression? What could we be deficient in and why? On Monday evening, April the 2nd at 2012, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'll be conducting a complimentary webinar on depression that'll be about an hour. You can register for this webinar at debbiewaldeck.com. What I'm doing right now is I'd like to give you a little intro, a little tidbit of some of the information I'll be presenting and I'll be expanding on. And if you like it, please share it, tweet it, Facebook it, email it, because every one of us knows someone who's suffering with depression. So let's look at some stats. We know right now that about 10% of our population are diagnosed and being treated for depression. But what's really alarming is that preschoolers are the fastest growing market for antidepressants. In fact, the rate of increase of depression in our children is at 23%. It's part of the reason that I wrote Saving Generation Next, which discusses the underlying root issue to this chronic increase in diseases and health conditions in both our children and adults. The worst thing is that we're being prescribed antidepressants, but they're only working a third of the time. Yet, of the top 10 prescriptions today, 3 of them are for depression. Yes, it's true, the brain is what we're treating, and it is a chemical factory, but I'm going to show you it's much more than that. And the brain and depression is actually a symptom of an underlying problem, not necessarily just the cause that we're treating. The brain is always producing neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which we're treating for depression. But the bottom line is these neurotransmitters require raw materials, which would be amino acids, vitamins, minerals, or essential fatty acids, for instance. So you tell me, Debbie, I'm taking vitamins, I'm eating healthy, but I'm still depressed. I'm giving my body these nutrients, but I'm still depressed. Well, the reality is when the brain receives insufficient amounts, then we're going to see serious problems with neurotransmitters and mental health may follow. So you may be taking the nutrients, but you may not be absorbing them, or you may be losing them because you're unaware of things in our environment or certain chemicals and preservatives that are actually depleting us of the nutrients we need to create these neurotransmitters. Remember, you're not deficient in Prozac. Briefly, I'm just going to share with you why I became so interested in preventative health education. And it's really that I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease many years ago. And when I asked why, I was told it was all genetic. Yet no one in my family had anything like it. So like you and many, I was prescribed medications. Unfortunately, I became pregnant not long after. And during the course of my pregnancy, I was told, due to noted complications, to abort my child. And honestly, I fell to my knees and in prayer came to the conclusion that I would hold on to this birth. Unfortunately, our child was born with significant complications. And I researched for 7 years health and nutrition, and I was doing everything the doctors told me, but you know what? He wasn't getting better. In fact, every year was a new diagnosis. So I was forced to rely on observation and my own common sense. In fact, what I did was I asked our child to write the name. And I'm saying child because I'm just for privacy, I've omitted the first name. But I asked the child to write the name, and then I fed the child a little bit of peanut butter. I waited 15 minutes and said, write the name again. And you can see here that they couldn't even spell their name. Now, mind you, over these years, this child was diagnosed with asthma, respiratory airway disease, eczema, ADHD, lazy eye, and the list goes on. And you know what? It wasn't about the peanut butter. It was that the body wasn't processing it. Something was going on. I was missing something. Now, if ADHD can if I can cause it based on something I'm putting in my mouth, could we do that with depression or other mental health issues? You see, there is a profound relationship between overall health and the health of the intestinal tract. And I found after 7 years of research that the gut trains the immune system. In fact, by applying the principles I've laid out in Saving Generation Next, our child became whole and today is serving at one of the military academies. Again, for privacy, I'm leaving it with that. But I can tell you, I'm glad I didn't listen to everything I was told, and I'm glad you're listening to me here now. So let's look at depression and the gut. An inflamed, leaky gut can lead to what's known as leaky brain. And when the gut becomes permeable and inflamed, it activates pro-inflammatory cytokines, which causes inflammation, which leads to a kind of mental depression and lethargy, which is induced by these cytokines. When you look further, the gut-brain axis also plays a pivotal role because these same cytokines from the gut will actually cross the blood-brain barrier and then stimulate enzymes which will deplete something called tryptophan, which I'll be talking about on Monday night. But tryptophan is one of the ingredients, if you will, for making serotonin. So I asked, when I was looking at the whole immune system and this overactive immune system, how are the intestines developed? How is the immune system developed? And in fact, it's done in the beginning and later affected by lifestyle. Now, I have this comprehensively laid out in my first book and on webinars on my website, but I'm going to be very brief here. And if you want to get more information, go to my website, go to my book. But when we are born, our birth canal, our intestinal area is sterile. And we're exposed to bacteria while passing through the birth canal, and that is our first inoculation of bacteria. And the development of this bacteria will actually affect the way the immune system is developed. But what few people really recognize is that the bacteria in the intestinal area is mirrored in the birth canal. So over these generations of increases in medications and chemicals and preservatives without any information about restoring intestinal integrity, there's been a decline in the quality of this inoculation. It's further developed the way a child is fed. But today, 87% of our infants are formula fed after 30 days. They are not developing antibodies in the gut, which supports and develops the immune system. The result is a hyperactive immune system evidenced by asthma, ADHD, autism, autoimmune disease, allergies, and these are the early red flags and warning signs. Disruptions occur later with stress, steroids, mother's health, sugar, antibiotics, over-the-counter drugs, early feeding, and now the 34% rate of C-sections where the child's not even getting that initial inoculation. Bottom line is that we're seeing a growing majority of children that are receiving this lack of inoculation, which has resulted in a 56% increase in antacids for children under the age of 4, 700% increase in ADHD, 1,000% increase in autism, 4-fold increase in chronic childhood illness in the last 3 years. And why? Because the overuse of antibiotics, chemicals, preservatives, chlorine, fast food, sugar, and more have created the perfect storm. We have not discussed how to correct it. But what's happened is mother's intestinal flora has been assaulted, and there's not anything left to give. The quality of that initial inoculation is compromised, and hence what's also compromised is the integrity of the immune system. So how does that relate to depression? There's more serotonin receptor sites in the gut than in the brain. And people with serotonin will have low levels and might have carbohydrate cravings, depression, OCD, violence, aggression, suicide, and urinary frequency, hyperactive bladder, and so on. But the reality is that the components to serotonin are magnesium, B vitamins, and that L-tryptophan, which is an amino acid also known as 5-HTP. What's interesting is systemic inflammation is associated with low magnesium and also depression. And now what research is showing is that magnesium intake is related to depression and is supported by clinical studies. So I'm interested in why we put fluoride in the water but not magnesium, for instance. So you ask yourself, what comes first, depression or inflammation? Think about this. Does depression originate in the brain or in the gut? because imbalance in the intestinal ecology will create a hyperactive immune system, make it difficult to absorb minerals because of intestinal inflammation, like magnesium, will compromise the intestinal bacteria's production of B vitamins. It's part of serotonin. This can lead to food intolerances, another early red flag and warning sign, cause inflammation, and in that create those cytokines that can lead to lethargy and depression, and thus lower that tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin. Even the World Health Organization is talking about it, that unipolar major depression was the leading cause of disability. This is 22 years ago, and that depression and heart disease will be the most common diseases on Earth by 2020. And both of them have strong correlations to magnesium deficiency. But you know what? It's no longer in our foods due to the way that we're farming. Years ago, cabbage had 66 milligrams of magnesium. 20 years ago, only 15. What is it today? The good bacteria in the gut also makes B vitamins. B6 and B12 promote dopamine production, one of the body's neurotransmitters responsible for pleasure, our joy neurotransmitter. And if a person doesn't have amount of these vitamins, they're going to experience lethargy, lack of concentration, anxiety, and other symptoms similar to seasonal affective disorder. There's also genetics and methylation, which I'll speak about further in future webinars, which seems complicated. But the bottom line is that, you guys, our genes have not changed that much in 4 decades, but disease has. What's happened is we have certain genes that we've had all along that would make us not as able to detoxify, if you will, which we were fine 40 years ago. But now with so many toxins in our environment, the combination of the environment and our genes is now increasing disease. But we can do something about it. How about stress? Everybody's under stress. Stress releases a hormone called cortisol. But what's known is excessive cortisol may lower thyroid production. It may lower tryptophan. It will deplete the body of both magnesium and B vitamins. And recent studies indicate that serotonin, which is targeted by most antidepressants, is not as much a factor in depression as is the presence of the stress hormone cortisol. You know, even children who have precocious puberty or they develop early, we're learning now that it's more a result of more cortisol than it is hormones in our beef. So if you like what you've heard, please go to wwaldick.com, register for the complimentary webinar that will take place April the 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And again, if you like this, share it. I want to thank you. This is Debbie Waldick with the Saving Generation Next project.